Boxer Talk family, we are this much closer to the imminent showdown with Saul Canelo Alvarez, aka Cinnamon, and Terence Bud Crawford, aka Budrick. I'm talking about it's right around the corner, almost in a week's time. Now, a lot of people have compared this fight to other fights that they had in the past, you know, with Cinnamon versus Jermell Charlo, and Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence. And I'm here to tell you again that I think those comparisons are almost erroneous, and I will say yes, they're similar, but the reason why I say that there's an error is because Terence Bud Crawford is known to show more heart than what Jermell Charlo showed against Cinnamon. And then also, you know, Cinnamon isn't gonna be as compromised or have any health questions like Errol Spence had. You see what I'm saying? So that's why I think it's more accurate to compare it to one certain fight in particular that the Boxer Talk family that rocks with this channel heavily, you already know I made the comparison. I'm here to tell you again today what that comparison will be.
Hello guys, this is Rolly Romero.
Yo, my name is Nonito Donaire. What's up guys, Designer's Eyes.
We're here with Bob Santos Boxing.
And I rock with Dr. Boxing Talk.
I want to give a quick shout out to Dr. Boxing Talk.
And I want to give a big shout out to Dr. Boxing Talk. Thank you for all the love, thank you for all the support.
You're rocking with Dr. Boxing Talk. Get your daily news from my man right here, the best in the business. Let's get it, baby.
All day, baby.
Amen.
Bam!
If I tell you I'm good, probably you will say I'm boasting. If I tell you I'm no good, you know one line.
Yo, what's good, Boxer Talk family? BTF, rise up. Let's get it, man. Welcome back to your favorite boxing news channel, Dr. Boxing Talk. We are back for another YouTube video banger, man. Yes, sir. Yes, man. I don't know what time it is. The doctor's in the house, man. So check this out. But before we do, let's go ahead and smack that like button. Let's do it together. Appreciate you. That helps us to keep going and growing on this YouTube platform. So check this out, man. You know, I was just going through my head and I was just thinking about this fight, man. I'm not gonna lie. When it was first announced, I was like, I'm not really too excited for Cinnamon versus Bud, you know, because these are some of my favorite fighters. You know, Cinnamon is definitely my favorite fighter, him and Gervonta Tank Davis, but Terence Bud Crawford is also one of my favorite fighters. So, you know, one part of me is excited because I get to see two top competitors go at it, which I love to see. I don't hate when my favorite fighters fight. I actually like it, but then I'm also conflicted when it comes to actually seeing who is going to win or who I'm rooting for, you know. But I did make an assessment on who I think is going to win, and that's Canelo. I'm going with the bigger guy, right? Not just because he's only bigger, but he's also skilled. He's an all-time great, legendary fighter, phenomenal fighter, just like Terence Bud Crawford. That's what makes it interesting, is because he's also a all-time great, you know, phenomenal fighter who's been 2 times undisputed in 2 different weight classes and undefeated while doing it. You cannot question their greatness, right? This is not a battle for greatness. They're both already great. This is a battle of greatness where 2 great, phenomenal top tier athletes, world-class athletes, are coming together for a great night of boxing. Now, what makes it questionable is the weight disparity, right? The weight differential is kind of massive, you know. Terence Bud Crawford's coming from 154, and he only had 1 fight there, his debut against the undefeated champion Israel Madrimov, and he's jumping up 2 weight classes, but most of us consider him a welterweight. So it's like he's jumping up 3 weight classes to super middleweight at 168, right? And Canelo, who's a great fighter, you know, he's the first ever undisputed in the super middleweight division and only, and he's going to be fighting a smaller guy, right? So I think that with them both being great, you know, I'm going with Cinnamon. But I think that the most accurate comparison in a fight that we've already seen before is not Errol Spence versus Terence Bud Crawford or Saul Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo, but it is a fight that included one of those guys, and that is Errol Spence. And I think that this fight is more accurately compared to Errol Spence versus Mikey Garcia. And I'm telling you, there's so many similarities. Like I said, I've said this before on my channel multiple times during our lives. We had great discussions about it. So shout out to the Boxer Talk family that's loyal and they come through and they already know. But I'm gonna repeat it again for those of you that may have missed the multiple times I've said it, right? Think about it. You know, Mikey Garcia, even though he's been in multiple weight classes at 126 and smaller, and then he's been all the way up to 140, he was mostly and widely considered a 135-pound fighter. I mean, check out the broadcast right here if you don't believe me.
As it is a moral victory for Garcia to go to 12, it's kind of a little bit of a letdown not to be able to stop a guy that's 135 pounds, 135 pounder as well.
Yeah, so they equated him to a 135-pound fighter. Whether you want to think that's accurate or not, that's how he was considered. And he's going up against who? A guy at welterweight at 147 who would be 2 divisions higher, right? Just like Terence Bud Crawford is 2 divisions smaller than Canelo. That's an accurate comparison right there. Then another accurate comparison is that what is Errol Spence and Mikey Garcia? Both of them were pound for pound fighters at the time. You could not doubt their skill. They're both phenomenal, accomplished fighters. You see what I'm saying? And then Errol Spence was at the time not only just a 147-pound champion, very recognized. Mikey Garcia is also a former champion coming up, you know, to challenge for greatness. But who was considered the more skilled out of those two? Even though they were both very skilled, who was considered slightly more skilled? That'd be the smaller guy coming up in Mikey Garcia. And who's considered slightly more skilled than Canelo and Terence Bud Crawford? That'd be, again, the smaller guy in Terence Bud Crawford. He's considered to be a little bit more skilled than Canelo. Not saying Canelo's not skilled, just like we weren't saying Errol Spence wasn't skilled. But we saw that Mikey Garcia and Terence Crawford were known to be more skilled, you know. And then Terence Bud Crawford has also shown footage of him being bigger and coming into the size well and sparring with bigger guys like Lester Martinez and Steven So Cold Nelson. And we also have this infamous video of Mikey Garcia sparring heavyweights as well. Check it out.
Reach in with the right hand. We're gonna reach in.
Yeah, so it's a lot of similarities. And the part that I think is very funny and very crazy, right, is that the biggest contrast between Canelo and Bud and Errol Spence and Mikey Garcia is that it's just a complete opposite, right? And what would that contrast be exactly? Well, in Errol Spence versus Mikey Garcia, we have the Mexican fighter. Well, technically Mexican-American, you know, he's American, but he's considered the Mexican fighter, right? In Mikey Garcia, being the smaller guy going against the American guy, you know, African-American Errol Spence, right? So we have the black guy versus the brown guy. And in one instance, Errol Spence was bigger, and then Mikey Garcia was smaller. And then in Canelo versus Terence Crawford, again, we have a black versus brown, a Mexican versus American, truly. And we have the Mexican fighter in Canelo Alvarez being the bigger guy, and the American fighter in Terence Bud Crawford being the smaller guy. So that's really the biggest contrast between this. Now, if you want to argue who's better, yes, I would say that Terence Crawford is better than Mikey Garcia, more accomplished, right? And then I would also argue that Canelo is better than Errol Spence, more accomplished. So you could look at it even with that other difference, right? You could look at it as this is just Errol Spence and Mikey Garcia on steroids.
Uh-oh, Richard. Oh, wow.
Well, dang, I probably shouldn't have said on steroids given the current landscape of boxing with all these steroids running rampant. But I'm saying it's like a souped up, heightened version of Mikey Garcia, Errol Spence turned up, you know what I'm saying? I say turned up to an extra degree with Canelo versus Terence Crawford. So like I said with my prediction, man, I'm not picking Canelo because I don't like Bud or I would be mad if Bud wins. No, I think Bud is a very phenomenal fighter, and I would not be surprised if he wins. I think it's a very close fight. But I'm going with Canelo because, like I said, I think that they're both great. But I just think that, you know, the one guy's great and he's bigger. You know, I think that even though Terence Crawford, like Mikey Garcia, may have the superior skills, I don't think the skill gap is as wide as the size gap. So I don't think it's going to be as significant. So I'm going with Cinnamon. I think it's going to play out similarly to how Errol Spence and Mikey Garcia played out, with Mikey Garcia having good moments, but Errol Spence pretty much dominating the fight, you know. But I will say this. I will say that Terence Crawford will probably win more rounds because for a lot of people, Errol Spence, rightfully so, watched Mikey Garcia. I think Terence Crawford, like I've said this before many times, I think he's going to win the first, like, maybe 4 or 5 rounds. Not saying he's going to win all 4 or 5 of those rounds, but I think he'll have more success early, but then towards the back half of the fight, you know, I'll say around like around round 6 or 7, I think Cinnamon and his size that he's going to impose in his will, I think he's going to start to take over, and those shots are going to add up and accumulate. Now, will Terence Bud Crawford do what we know him to do, bite down and be the bigger dog in the fight, always want to go and fight and bring the fight to the other opponent and go in an exchange? If he does that, I think he gets stopped. You know, I'm not saying he gets put to sleep like Pacquiao and Marquez, but I'm saying he might get stopped where Bomac might have to throw in the towel, or it might be a corner stoppage or a ref stoppage. But if he does decide to just continue outboxing him and be okay with quote unquote surviving, similar to what Mikey Garcia did, then I think that Canelo wins by decision. But either way, I have Canelo winning. But like I said, if Bud wins, if Bud pulls it off, man, that'd be a hell of a statement, man. I definitely don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. It could go either way, but for me, I'm going with Cinnamon winning, man. And once again, too, I want to say this. When I just said that Mikey Garcia decided to finish the fight, that's impressive. I'm not saying that he was cowering. I'm not saying he was trying to survive like he was afraid. He was, at a certain moment in that fight, you could just see that he would need a knockout. And that's what I'm saying. And you could tell that he probably knew he wasn't going to get a knockout, but he was still fighting because of where he is. Like Mikey Garcia, Errol Spence, like I said, again, those are 2 of my favorite fighters. And I was like, man, I had that back then too. I had Errol Spence winning because I was like, man, Mikey Garcia might be a little bit more skilled, but Errol Spence being also skilled and bigger, even if he's not quite as skilled as Mikey Garcia, I think it's going to be too much, and that's exactly how it went. So shout out to Mikey Garcia. He fought to the end. I think Terence Crawford is going to fight to the end, but I just think Cinnamon is going to be too much, similarly to how Errol Spence was. But y'all let me know what y'all think about that. Don't forget to smack that like button, but most importantly, remember, with God, we can do anything. Without God, we're nothing. The doctor's out. Peace.
From the hood to college, both worlds they had to meet. 6 degrees between us, so cold we're about to freeze. But we're Florida boys, hot takes, we bring the heat. We're moving the culture, the engineers to the streets.